Hello, dear colleagues. Can you hear me? Can you see the presentation? Can you hear me? Everything's fine technically? Yeah. So today our topic is emotional intelligence in academia. And as Natalia said, I not only have been teaching foreign languages for couple decades, but I also had some experience in psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, and psychology, and which allows me, not being an expert, that's too much, but having knowledge and skills that can, in combination with linguistic skills, can help understand quite a few points about how emotional intelligence and not only cognitive intelligence work in academia. Our first, our plan is as follows. First, I will very briefly speak of what is emotional intelligence, which, well, it is a vast area, really vast domain. And I will not go into many details. I'll just cover those that are related to academic activity. Namely, I will speak about empathy. Why about empathy? Because this term is very often used these days and is very often abused. So I'd like to look into what empathy really is and how it is related to our life and work. Specific things like active listening as part of the tools of emotional intelligence in academia, about non-evaluative feedback, and about emotional intelligence in academic writing, and namely about author's voice in academic writing. As Natalia said, I will be happy to take questions at the end of our workshop. What is emotional intelligence? The word intelligent, just about the term itself, there is a joke that I really enjoy. My dog is so intelligent. Can he read? Are you kidding? Of course not. Then he's just smart, and you aren't very clever if you still haven't realized the difference between these words. So there are quite a few synonyms, or not really synonyms, words that are close in meaning to the word intelligent. It's smart, clever, bright. What is the difference between those words and intelligence? Intelligent. Intelligence is not really something innate. It can be developed. Both cognitive and emotional intelligence are things that can be taught and learned, and that is why we are here in some way, because we know that we can learn it and we can teach it. So clever is defined by the situation that the person or a dog or a cat or a parrot even can react to the situation, not because of their intellect, of their intelligence, but just because they are reactive and intuitive. Smart means to be able to being smart means to be able to solve a problem, to think logically and make a good choice in the situation. Whereas intelligence is one step above, one step further. It is used to describe people who can think on their own. So this is independent. And an independent person, in terms of cognitive intelligence, is, of course, member of the academia. And emotional intelligent person this quality also relates to academia, among other things. It's an interesting thing linguistically that what do we call a person that we think is, sorry to say, stupid? What is the polite way of saying the person is stupid? Well, let's say not to say directly to that person, but about a third party, like, oh, he's stupid. But we want to be we want to hedge this. Hedging is something that we'll talk about it by the closer to the end of the seminar. But how to hedge it, how to not to say very directly, he's stupid. Instead of that, what do we say? Not bright enough. Anastasia says yes. For example, this very close to what is well, I cannot say it's appropriate because nothing is very much appropriate, but still, he's not, or she or they are not particularly bright, because enough is evaluative, not particularly bright, or as our fellows from Arizona University call it mentally challenged. So not particularly bright, it means that the person is absolutely dumb, absolutely stupid. Can we say not particularly intelligent? Not really, because intelligence is the quality which is absolute more than smart. It's like an absolute quality. You can be intelligent or not. You cannot be not particularly intelligent, although this can be said. But in everyday life, we do not speak about people who are not particularly intelligent or more intelligent than the others. We speak about intelligent people, or we don't speak about that at all. So cognitive intelligence and emotional intelligence, these are two sides of the same coin. Cognitive intelligence is the ability to plan, to reason, to use logical deduction to address problems, and the capability to apply abstract thinking, responding to the environment. And emotional intelligence is actually the same. It is the ability to respond to the environment, to, as you righteously said, the ability to recognize your own emotions, the emotions of the others, and the ability to make emotions work for you instead of working against you, as Justin Pariso, one of the greatest experts on emotional intelligence, has put it. So if we look a little bit into the term itself, it was coined by Daniel Goleman as long ago as in 1995, when he wrote his famous book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, the groundbreaking book that redefines what it means to be smart, he wrote. Actually, we can say that the title, the term itself, emotional intelligence, is, well, it could have been something different. It's just Goleman who coined it, and we follow his concept of emotional intelligence. I mean that now we have to explain why intelligence and why emotional. So the term itself is a little bit tricky and difficult. I will not go into that very much. We'll just take Goleman's word for the intelligence and emotional. It's more important to see what it stands for, what it implies. According to classical Goleman structure of emotional intelligence, it has 5 parts. So if we go clockwise from the upper circle, it's self-awareness, which means that we understand our own emotions. Then we have self-regulation, that is, we make our emotions work for us, not against us. Then it is motivation, which is clear from the previous parts, because it shows extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, intrinsic motivations as well. It's, you know, that it's very difficult to find purely intrinsic motivation. Most of it is still extrinsic, but it explains some emotional connotations. Then there is the famous empathy, and a rather weird thing that Goleman called social skill, which actually refers to communication and to using emotional intelligence in interpersonal communication. Of all the 5, empathy, as I said in the beginning of our workshop, is something that is most often used of the whole scheme of emotional intelligence. It's like I go to my hairdressers and she tells me some story, you know, the kind hairdressers tell you about their friends you have never met. And she says, oh, she's such an empathetic person. And I wonder what she means by that. Here, I have to remind you, of course, you know it in this wonderful audience, everyone knows this difference, but still, may I remind you of the difference between empathy and sympathy? That very often they take sympathy for empathy, whereas sympathy is not real empathy. And Arseny in the beginning said a very important thing, that empathetic reaction or empathetic response is socially appropriate. Like, for example, a person says, I lost my keys. It's inappropriate in society to say, okay, I'm hungry, let's go and have something to eat. Just not to react at all. So you have to have some sympathy if something bad happened. Whereas, as you all know, it's much more difficult to share joy than to share grief in society. And in society, there are no norms and regulations for sharing or sympathizing or empathizing here with the joy. What is important there is to really read and see the emotions of the other person. So it is a crucial element of emotional intelligence, very often mentioned, much more often misused, and I will tell you why. And you will understand why it is misused. So the Cambridge Dictionary defines it as the ability to share someone else's feelings or experience by imagining what it would be like to be in that person's situation, or is in a very often used phrase, to put somebody, to put yourself into somebody else's shoes. I love, there is a picture which I did not put here, but it's a very nice one, and I think about it, about a man who puts himself into his wife's shoes, which doesn't make good anyone, to the man, to the wife, or to the shoes. So because the shoes are absolutely, the shoes are too small for him, and they are absolutely destroyed. Why empathy? This is the most important question. Okay, you are empathetic. Why? Empathy is important for us. If we don't react in an appropriate way, it can ruin our relationship. It can ruin our communication. It can ruin our career in any domain, in any sphere. So empathy and being able to react appropriately to what is going on, to the other person's emotions, this is selfish. And it is bringing both to you and to the other people. So that was only to say that we're empathetic, not because we are kind by nature, but because it brings us good. And because in this way, we are more effective, we are more efficient, we are more influential. This is what is empathy. I will give you an example. This is from education. It's a recent example. I had an individual consultation in the Zoom with a student, which is quite well adult PhD student, and I just asked how he was doing, and he started crying, started sobbing, actually, and he said that he had some very difficult situation because the long-term relationship suddenly ended and he did not feel comfortable at all, and he was like sobbing in front of me in the Zoom. What would you do? Or what do you do? Or what did you do? Or what have you done? Say, what would you say exactly? I will not give you a recipe. I'll tell you what I did, but I will not give you a recipe. I just want to share how we in everyday life And do you understand that, of course, I was feeling uncomfortable because I was having a session on academic writing. I was supposed to be doing something with his research paper. And instead I have this. And of course I feel sorry. Of course I feel pity. What do I do? What questions do I ask? What do I say? And I'm not giving you any recipe, but what I did, I said, listen, I am all there for you. We have our session. I am there and we have our time. If you want to talk to me, if you want to tell me more about the situation, I'm all ears. I don't know if I can give you any advice, but I will listen to you if you want to tell me more. If you don't want to tell me more, please do not. We can just sit and look at each other and speak about something else. And there is the third option. And the third option, we go on to your research paper and we discuss it. It's not because I'm not empathizing. It's not because I don't want to listen about your story. It's your choice, what you want to do. And he is sobbing. He said, research paper, please. And I said, yeah, great. I'm all with you with the research paper. And after the session, he said, you know, I am so happy we turned to the research paper because, well, I can't say that I'm feeling better, but I am like, I can cope with it at this very moment. We all live here and now. And at that moment, it was the choice for him. So I offered him a choice. Somehow I felt that he needed me to give him that choice. Again, talking things through helps. So why are people empathic? We described it. So a small conclusion here, that it is important to act accordingly, according to other people's emotions, in the way that will be less harmful for you. Because in my situation, the guy was feeling awkward, but I was also feeling awkward, you know, grown up man sobbing in front of me. Do you think I felt comfortable? No. I was a bit at a loss with that. And another word which is very important here is that we recognize and anticipate other people's emotions to make them work for you. We have to anticipate what the person is going to feel, what experience the person is going to experience, in order to structure our written or oral communication in the way that will be bringing and positive. Because, may I just remind you one almost final thing about emotional intelligence, that there are no good or bad emotions. There are no positive or negative emotions. The emotions can be only constructive or destroying. So the emotions that work for you, and this may be even anger or grief or anything. And on the other hand, there are destructive emotions, which joy can be destructive if you are happy when another person has failed. This is a destructive emotion. Believe me, it's destructive for you as well, because this may have consequences, very specific consequences for your own life. Because this is the end of this, so to say, not theoretical part, but the background part. We discussed some very important things about people's emotions. In academia, we also have emotions. Academia is all about emotions. It is not devoid of emotions. Anything that you would like to add at this point, or comment or ask? So, why emotional intelligence in academia? Why empathy in academia? As you already mentioned, it is all about improving work relationships and creating a healthy, productive workplace and organizational culture. And we will look at a couple of aspects of this in the further parts of our workshop. So what does it do, emotional intelligence? You can understand your peers. You can improve your communication skills, and also other people with, this is a little bit of physiology, neurons, your peers can learn skills and empathy from you, and you help them to become more effective themselves. To put it in more simple words, to put it short, it's about understanding your peers and communication skills. How do we build emotional intelligence? How do we use emotional intelligence in academia? One of the tools, one of the most important tools for using emotional intelligence in academia is active listening. Of course, many of you know what is active listening. Why active? What is active about? Now you all listen to me. Is it active listening? I hope so. But the exercise in active listening, what is it? What does it always imply? It implies communication. It implies saying something back. And it is very important for the further communication. So active listening, and it implies the techniques of restating, summarizing, reflecting, sending feedback, and validating, all of which imply emotional intelligence. Why do we say that they imply emotional intelligence? Someone is telling you someone is speaking about their research. You are in the situation when you you are interested, but maybe you have some other things to think about, and you don't listen. And then you understand that's your emotions. The indifference, it's also an emotion. They are transmitted, they are understood, they are read by the other person, and the other person feels the emotion of frustration, which you feel that they're experiencing in your turn. And this is like a snowball of indifference to frustration to anger, which can lead to some devastating consequences. So listening, when you are in the situation where you listen to other people, it means that you imply all the 5 elements, and that makes it efficient. Our next part, it's about non-evaluative feedback, which is a big cultural issue in Russia, in my opinion, because as soon as anyone gives a presentation, what happens with the students? 2 ways, 2 options. Option 1, bright, brilliant, perfect, wonderful, excellent mark, let's go on. End of class. Or the second, slide 5 is ugly. You should speak more about your graphs. You should use something different in your research. Both are absolutely frustrating, both responses. What is non-evaluative feedback? Non-evaluative feedback has to do with emotions and empathy, and actually with what Anatoly just said, with being heard. The person made an effort to deliver, to get their ideas through. Now the audience, in response, gives a feedback, a non-evaluative feedback. What does it mean, non-evaluative feedback? It has to be specific. You do not say everything is good or everything is bad. And by the way, you do not use words good or bad in academia, as we all know. Nothing is good or bad. It's, I don't know, high, efficient, etc. So it has to be specific, non-evaluative, again, no, not good, not bad, and goal related. We know why and how we did something to evaluate it. So I suggest, well, there are lots of methods, that the English are very keen on coining special acronyms like KISS, keep it smart and simple, which is now call it keep it simple, stupid, or whatever. So anything that you can think of. So there is one of the models, not the model, but one of the models is RISE, R-I-S-E model for meaningful feedback, which means R stands for reflect, I stands for inquire, seeking information, provide ideas by asking questions. S stands for suggest, introduce ideas that may improve the current version. And E, evaluate, which means to raise to a higher level in further revisions. And this model is based on the principles of emotional intelligence and empathetic approach, because again, it implies recognizing and understanding the emotions of the person who is speaking and reacting in a way that will make your account of research, for example, more efficient, even more efficient than it is now. What are the linguistic means of employing or implementing this model? To reflect, I really liked what? Not your presentation, but I liked the way you chose to illustrate how this is investigated, for example. Your figures reinforce the story you were telling. I especially liked it that you used to show us an example. Inquire. This is instead of you should speak about something different. I'm wondering if you have thought about other ways. Are there any other theories? It's not like, oh, do you think yours is the only one? No. Are there any other theories? Remember that we all know you are proficient in English, that everything that is polite is in question form, right? Are there any other theories? Suggesting, first be positive, even though I liked most of the examples, you might want to consider using. And the final E, evaluating. It's not that you should, but, or you have to, or even you must, but it might be helpful if you included this wonderful hedging, which, as we all know, again, hedging does not diminish the importance of what you are saying. It's just tuning into the emotions so that the other person, it does not even have the slightest idea of taking your words as being passive-aggressive. Passive-aggressive or toxic is now the word. So no passive aggression, no toxicity. It might be helpful if you include it. This is about language, but this is the language of emotions. This is all the language of emotions. So we practiced some feedback, some activity, some active listening. Where else does emotional intelligence come into play in academia? Strange as it may seem, but it comes into play in academic writing, which is supposed to be unemotional, impartial, yes, but unemotional. Well, objective, yes. I'm trying to say what it has to be and which it isn't. It is supposed to be impersonal. However, it is not. And impersonal writing is not fun. I come back to what we started with. And it's not interesting to read. And you will never gain the audience if you make it unemotional. It is not only facts. It is positions. It is not only ideas. It's connecting people and ideas. English academic writing is a bit different, and Russian academic writing, very frankly, I don't read much of it, but when I read, I want to cry, although these days it's become better. But those paragraph-long sentences, those things that seem to be academic, but they are not academic, you just go through that forest of words to try to find the idea. This is not academic. You do not want to read it. Your text has to be written in the way that people are interested. It's a story, after all. You want to convey your ideas. You want to have the emotion of understanding, of sharing, but not that of boredom. And this is what we call author's voice, and whether author's voice is appropriate in today's academic writing and today's academic writing practice. In fact, what is a written text? It is an interaction between the writer and the reader. What is the reader's role? The reader understands the text, otherwise makes no sense to write, because writers are not writing for themselves, they're writing for target audience. And That is why we come back to the word anticipate, which we used earlier in the presentation. It's important for the writers to predict and respond to reactions from the potential audience. What elements of emotional intelligence and of this author's voice do we find in academic texts? There are two things. There is stance and engagement. What is stance? Stance is the attitude of the writer to what they expose in the academic text. And engagement is establishing connections with the reader, like inviting the reader to participate, engaging them to share the research that you have done and its result. And both stance and engagement are elements of author's voice in academic writing. So again, stance is the ways in which the author expresses themselves and their voice regarding the topic under research, and to those who published before them. What are the specific elements of stance? The famous hedges, because they may present the information as opinion. All those and mate and appear and tend to and perhaps and at least, they are and the like, they are all elements of stance. As well as boosters, the certainty markers, clearly, obviously, surely, highly, systematically, etc. Although you are welcome to use them as elements of author's voice. But on the other hand, be very careful about them, because we remember that what can be the emotion of the reader, if you write, it is clear that what may be the reaction. If you write, it is clear that.
But it's not so obvious for me then.
It's not obvious for me. Why is this person saying that? Am I stupid? Or are they unclear? I mean, what do they take me for? For a person who can understand that thing? Or am I not intelligent enough? Be very careful about that. My students very often fall into the trap when I ask them, what is the English for из графика становится очевидно? What is the English for that? Из графика очевидно. The graph shows. It's obvious. Be very careful about not offending the reader. So yes, it is clear that, but be careful. It's only in the context that you can use that. And this has been the whole context of the article to be taken into account. Attitude markers, like the verbs, be free to use them, agree, propose, claim, argue. The adverbs, unfortunately, interestingly, hopefully, that is something that is very common for showing the author's voice. We try to warn about using sufficient and significant, because they do not work as in Russian достаточно высокий. It doesn't mean anything, достаточно. It's a linker in Russian, a filler. So if it is sufficient or significant, it means for what? We want to know what is it sufficient or significant for. So that was stance. And engagement invites the reader to be part of your research, to be involved in what you are writing, in what you are discussing and describing. And here, what do? We can use questions. We can, is it in fact necessary to choose between nurture and nature? Question. Appeals to shared knowledge. Remember to provide reference. Indigenous communities of today are known to have been reorganized, so referring to some common knowledge. Here you invite the reader to work with you, to be part of your, if not research, but to be part of your account of your research. We often use reader pronouns, you and your, and inclusive we, where we include actually the reader is also part of engagement. Well, directives, be careful about them. Note, let, assume is a bit emotionally they are less harmful than should and ought to, the necessity models, which have to be dealt with very carefully. I have given here an example of an article that has recently been published in a very important scientific journal. It would have been absolutely impossible some years ago. Here, an important question arises. How can SSQCCs be implemented? This is the qubits. Intuitively, it seems reasonable that they can be prepared with fractal electrode geometries. Once again, it appears intuitively reasonable. And this is how the author's voice works these days in academia, which has stopped being that formal. Of course, we have to observe the level of formality, but here we actually hear the author speaking, right? And that makes us follow their idea, follow their thought. So as you can see, the elements are clearly there. Indeed, the channel noise contribution is less when placing the quantum channel in the band. However, it is the fiber attenuation at the wavelength of 1310 that becomes the game changer. Of course, we put the game changer in inverted commas, but still, it gives the authors, it evokes the reader's interest and gives the author's attitude. It incomparably surpasses. Yeah, this incomparably is the element of the author's voice. So actually, this article also has been accepted for publication with peer review, ranking it as excellent in everything, including the language. So we can afford being present and being personal and showing emotions in this way, in using stance and engagement. So, to summarize, what did we see today? We looked into the notions and the concepts of emotional intelligence and empathy. And thank you very much for the feedback you gave. It was absolutely awesome how you understand what it is. We said that empathy is not innate. It can be developed. It can be learned and taught. In terms of academia, one of the powerful tools for building empathy is active listening, which we practiced. The next step would be non-evaluative feedback. RISE is one of the techniques, not the technique, but one of them, and you please feel free to use its formulations. And in writing, emotions and emotional intelligence really work because they contribute to the author's voice, which in its turn makes your writing more efficient. These were the points that I wanted to cover, and you will have some references. And I think that I will stop sharing. And before I invite questions,